Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Carly Spencer had always prided herself on her ability to protect those she loved. Throughout her life, she had weathered storms, faced betrayal, and fought fiercely to keep her family safe. But nothing in her past could have prepared her for the shock that was about to tear her world apart. A secret, a dark, dangerous secret about her daughter Jocelyn, was about to be revealed. Carly would find herself grappling with emotions she had never experienced before: betrayal, anger, and the kind of pain that could fracture even the strongest heart. It all began innocuously enough. Jocelyn, a young woman with so much promise, full of ambition and dreams for her future. However, everything changed the moment she was recruited by Brennan, Carly's boyfriend, into a secret and highly dangerous organization, WSB World Security Bureau. The WSB was a clandestine intelligence agency known to few, its operations shrouded in secrecy and peril. It was a place where people could disappear without a trace, and where even the most seasoned operatives faced life-threatening danger. Jocelyn, innocent and naive, had no idea what she was walking into. All she saw was an opportunity, a chance to prove herself and make a difference in the world. She had no understanding of the deadly consequences that would come with her involvement. Brennan, the man Carly had invited into her life, the man she trusted, had manipulated the situation in a way that no one could have anticipated. He pulled Jocelyn into the WSB's web without a second thought, without consulting Carly, without even a hint of transparency. Carly had believed Jack to be a loyal partner, a man who loved her and whom she could rely on. She had placed all her trust in him, never once questioning his actions. But to discover that he had brought her daughter into such a dangerous world without her knowledge or consent was nothing short of a betrayal. Carly had always fought to protect her family, and now, the very man she loved was responsible for putting her daughter in harm's way. This was a betrayal that struck at the very core of Carly's being, that she could not easily forgive. As the days passed, Carly's unease grew. Small, seemingly insignificant details began to add up: secretive conversations, the late-night phone calls, the whispers of a mission. Carly's instincts told her that something was amiss, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She trusted Jack, after all, didn't she? But how could she ignore the nagging feeling in her gut, the gnawing suspicion that her daughter was being kept in the dark about something important? Carly's protective nature kicked into high gear, and she began to ask questions, to investigate quietly, until the truth finally came crashing down on her like a ton of bricks. Jocelyn had been recruited into the WSB without Carly's knowledge, and Carly's worst fears had come to life. She was stunned, furious, and heartbroken all at once. Her daughter had been dragged into a world she was too young and too inexperienced to understand. Carly knew that the WSB was no place for someone like Jocelyn, someone who had only just begun to carve out her own path in life. The dangerous world of spies, covert missions, and life-or-death decisions was no place for her child, and yet, Jack had made the choice for her. But the betrayal didn't end there. Carly had always believed that Jason Morgan, her closest friend and confidant, was someone she could trust implicitly. Jason had been the one person Carly could rely on when the world seemed to turn against her. He had stood by her side through countless battles, offering his unwavering support. But now, Carly discovered that Jason knew about Jocelyn's involvement with the WSB all along, and yet, he had kept this secret from her. Carly had confided in Jason about everything, trusting him with her fears and her doubts. She had trusted him with the safety of her family, and yet he had chosen to remain silent. The pain of this revelation was unbearable. It felt like a double betrayal, as if the two people she loved and trusted most in the world had turned against her in her moment of need. Jason, however, had his reasons for staying silent. He knew the dangerous world Jocelyn was stepping into, but he also understood her desire to prove herself. He believed, perhaps naively, that keeping the secret from Carly would protect her, that she didn't need to know the full extent of the danger Jocelyn was in. But in doing so, Jason had crossed the line. He had failed Carly, the one person who had always been there for him, who had trusted him with everything. And now, Carly was left to pick up the pieces of her broken trust. The very foundation of her relationship with both Jason and Jack had been shaken to its core. The tension between Carly and Jack reached its breaking point when Carly finally confronted him. The confrontation was explosive. Carly demanded answers, her voice filled with raw emotion, her eyes blazing with the fury of a mother who had been betrayed. Jack tried to justify his actions, claiming that he had only wanted to give Jocelyn the opportunity to make a difference in the world. But Carly could hear none of it. In her eyes, there was no excuse for what he had done. He had endangered their daughter for his own reasons, and in doing so, he had destroyed any chance of a future together. The man she had once trusted was now a stranger to her, a man capable of making decisions for her family without consulting her, a man who had put her daughter's life in jeopardy. As the days went by, Carly's heartbreak turned into anger. She had always been the protector, the one who fought for her family, and now she was left to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. Jocelyn, for her part, was caught in the middle of this chaos. She had never intended to hurt her mother, but the consequences of her actions were becoming all too clear. Jocelyn had been naive, thinking she could make a difference by joining the WSB. But now, she saw the toll it was taking on her mother, and she felt guilty for the pain she had caused. The rift between Carly and Jason was the final blow. Carly, unable to forgive Jason for keeping such a dangerous secret from her, found herself questioning everything about their friendship. Jason had always been her rock, but now he was a reminder of the betrayal she felt from both him and Jack. The pain of losing the trust of the two people she had always relied on was almost too much to bear. But Carly was nothing if not resilient. She had faced heartbreak and betrayal before, and she knew she had the strength to face it again. She would fight for her daughter, fight to protect her from the dangers of the WSB, and fight to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Carly had always been a fighter, and this time would be no different. She would confront Jack and Jason, demand the truth, and, if necessary, walk away from both of them to protect her family. Nothing was more important to Carly than keeping her family safe, and she would do whatever it took to ensure that Jocelyn was no longer caught in the dangerous web of the WSB. The story, however, does not end there. Jason Morgan, Carly's closest confidant, and the person she had always trusted to protect her and her family, was also deeply involved in this chaotic situation. Although Jason was the only one who knew about Jocelyn's role at the WSB, he chose to keep it from Carly. His loyalty to her and his unwavering belief in the importance of Jocelyn's independence led him to make the decision to keep the secret. Jason believed that Jocelyn had the right to make her own choices about her life, even if that meant becoming involved with a dangerous organization like the WSB. However, this decision would prove to be a betrayal of Carly's trust in ways Jason could never have imagined. Carly, a woman who had always been the one to know everything about her family and the people she loved, could not tolerate Jason's silence. As a mother, Carly was driven by the need to protect her children from any danger, and the thought that she was being kept in the dark about such a serious matter was unbearable. She felt not only abandoned but also deceived by Jason, the one person she had always turned to in times of crisis. Her world was built on the foundation of loyalty and trust, but now that foundation was beginning to crack. And Carly's heart ached as she realized that the two people she had trusted most had hidden the truth from her. The signs were there, small, seemingly innocuous details that Carly could no longer ignore. Jocelyn's odd behavior, her secretive meetings with Jack Brennan, and her reluctance to discuss her involvement with the WSB all raised red flags. Carly's instincts, honed over years of protecting her family, told her that something was wrong, and she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to the story than she had been told. Determined to uncover the truth, Carly began to investigate, using her sharp intuition and her keen eye for detail to piece together the puzzle. Little did she know, the answers she was about to uncover would shatter everything she thought she knew. Jason, for his part, was caught in an incredibly difficult position. He understood Carly's need to know the truth, but he also knew that revealing Jocelyn's involvement with the WSB would devastate her. Jason had always been a man of few words, preferring to act rather than speak, and he struggled with the burden of keeping such a significant secret. While he respected Jocelyn's right to make her own choices, he also recognized the immense danger she was in, and he felt an overwhelming need to protect her. But now, he was facing a dilemma that he could no longer avoid. The secret had grown too large, and the weight of it was crushing him. He knew he could not keep hiding the truth from Carly forever, but he feared that revealing it would tear their friendship apart. He had always been Carly's rock, and the thought of losing that trust filled him with dread. Carly's intuition was her greatest strength, and it was also her greatest downfall in this moment. One fateful day, her curiosity got the better of her, and she stumbled upon a conversation between Jack Brennan and Jocelyn. It was a conversation that would change everything. Carly overheard them discussing a secret mission that Jocelyn had been assigned by the WSB, and it all clicked into place. Her heart sank as she realized that her daughter had been lured into a world of danger that Carly had never imagined, and it was happening right under her nose. The pain she felt was unbearable. This wasn't just about the danger Jocelyn was in, it was about the trust she had placed in the people closest to her, only to have it betrayed. The realization hit Carly like a punch to the gut. She had spent her entire life protecting her family, and now, in the most unexpected and devastating way, it felt as though she had failed. Jack Brennan, the man she had loved and trusted, was responsible for pulling Jocelyn into the dangerous web of the WSB, and that was something Carly could not reconcile. How could she have been so blind to the truth? How could she have trusted him, knowing that he had put her daughter at risk without her consent? Carly's heart shattered as she realized that Jack had manipulated not only Jocelyn but also her, using the very trust she had placed in him as a means to carry out his own agenda. The person she had considered her partner, her confidant, was now the very person responsible for putting everything she held dear in jeopardy. Carly's thoughts turned to Jocelyn. As a mother, Carly's love for her daughter knew no bounds, and the thought of her being caught in a world she could not control was more than she could bear. Jocelyn had always been her greatest joy, the one bright spot in her life, and to think that her daughter had been unknowingly thrust into a perilous situation was unbearable. Carly couldn't help but wonder how much Jocelyn truly understood about the danger she was in. Had she known what she was walking into, or had she been too naive to see the risks? And now, Carly felt a mixture of guilt and rage, a deep, aching sadness that she had failed to protect her child from the very dangers she had always fought to shield her from. The confrontation between Carly and Jack was inevitable, and when it came, it was explosive. Carly, her heart filled with a mix of anger and betrayal, demanded answers. Jack's defense was weak, his explanations hollow. He claimed that he had only wanted to help Jocelyn, to give her a chance to prove herself in a world of espionage and intrigue. But Carly could not hear his excuses. To her, it was unforgivable. Jack had taken her daughter, the one thing she loved most in this world, and exposed her to a world of danger for his own reasons. Carly could not fathom how he could have made such a decision without consulting her, without considering the consequences. The trust they had built over the years was gone in an instant. As the confrontation escalated, Carly's mind raced with the overwhelming flood of emotions that threatened to consume her. She was heartbroken, angry, and, above all, betrayed. The man she had loved, the man she had shared her life with, was now the person who had put everything she held dear at risk. She would never be able to look at him the same way again. And as for Jason, the man who had stood by her side for so long, his silence had cut deeper than any words ever could. How could he have known about Jocelyn's involvement and not said a word? How could he have let her walk blindly into such a dangerous situation without telling her? Carly's world was shattered, and she couldn't understand how the two people she trusted most could have kept such a devastating secret from her. But despite the devastation, Carly was not one to back down. She had always been a fighter, and she was not about to let her family fall apart without a fight. She would confront both Jack and Jason, demand the truth, and make sure that Jocelyn was safe from the dangers that had been thrust upon her. Carly had always been the protector, and this time would be no different. She would do whatever it took to rebuild her family, even if it meant facing the hardest truths of all. What hurt Carly the most wasn't just the betrayal from Jack Brennan, it was the silence from Jason. Jason Morgan, her confidant, her protector, the one person who had always been there for her, had kept such a huge secret from her. Carly couldn't understand how the man she had trusted above all others could have concealed something so important. She had spent her entire life defending the ones she loved, ensuring that no harm would come to them. She had built her world on trust, and the foundation of that world now felt like it was crumbling beneath her. Jason's silence was the most unbearable part of it all. Carly had never imagined that Jason, the man she had turned to in every crisis, would keep something so crucial from her. This wasn't just about Jocelyn's safety, this was about Carly's very sense of security, the sense of loyalty she had shared with the people closest to her. It felt as if the two people she had loved and trusted most had betrayed her. For Carly, this wasn't just an issue of physical danger to her daughter. It was a matter of emotional devastation. Carly had spent years fighting to keep her family safe. Whether it was from external threats or internal struggles, she had always been the one to stand guard. But now, she was confronted with a situation in which the danger to her family was not from an external force, it was coming from within, from the very people she loved. It was a betrayal that shook her to the core. The feeling of abandonment was consuming her, leaving a hollow pit where her confidence in the people closest to her once was. Jack Brennan, the man she had let into her life, was responsible for pulling her daughter into a world of secrecy and danger, and Jason, the person she had always turned to for support, had known the truth and kept it from her. The emotional toll was indescribable. Carly had always prided herself on being a fiercely protective mother and partner, and now she was left feeling helpless, deceived, and utterly alone. As Carly processed the depth of this betrayal, she knew she couldn't just sit idly by. She had always been a fighter, and this situation demanded that she fight harder than ever. The knowledge that her daughter was caught up in a world so dangerous and dark was overwhelming, but the sense of betrayal from the two people she trusted most in the world was even more crushing. She would have to make some very difficult choices that would test her values, her love, and her ability to forgive. How could she protect Jocelyn when her trust had been violated by those who were supposed to protect her? How could she ever forgive Jason, the one person she believed would never betray her? And how would she confront Jack Brennan, the man who had pulled her daughter into this twisted world? Carly had always prided herself on her ability to protect her loved ones, but in this moment, she was forced to confront the painful reality that some things were beyond her control. Jocelyn was no longer the young girl Carly had been able to shield from the world. She was an adult, making her own decisions, and Carly could no longer dictate the course of her life. It was a painful realization for a mother who had spent years making sure that nothing would ever harm her children. But Carly could no longer ignore the fact that her daughter was now involved in something much larger than herself, something that, if left unchecked, could consume her. Carly's first instinct was to protect her daughter at all costs, but she knew that confronting Jocelyn about her involvement with the WSB would only drive a wedge between them. She had to choose her words carefully, to make sure that Jocelyn knew that, despite everything, Carly was there for her. But how could she protect her from the dangers of the WSB when Carly herself felt betrayed by the very people who should have been supporting her? The emotional weight of it all felt unbearable. Every part of Carly's life, from her relationship with Jack to her bond with Jason, was now tainted by this secrecy. The next few days would see Carly grappling with the overwhelming flood of emotions she was feeling. She couldn't shake the anger that burned in her chest every time she thought of Jack. She would have to face him as the man she had loved and trusted, who had now placed her daughter in harm's way. The confrontation would not be pretty. Carly knew that nothing would ever be the same between them again. The bond they had once shared was broken, irreparably shattered by the deceit he had orchestrated. She could no longer see Jack as the man she had once trusted with her life. His betrayal was too deep, and his actions had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But even more painful was the fact that Carly had to face Jason, the man who had stood by her side for so many years, the one person she had trusted more than anyone, had kept the most painful secret of all. Jason's loyalty had always been unwavering, but in this instance, his decision to keep silent had destroyed the trust they had built. Carly would have to decide whether she could ever forgive him for hiding the truth, for failing to protect her from the knowledge that her daughter had been thrust into such a dangerous world. Jason had always been her rock, the one person who had never failed her, but now, Carly was left questioning everything about their relationship. As Carly prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Jack and Jason, she knew that this moment would define the course of her life. She would have to be strong, stronger than she had ever been before. She would have to look Jack in the eye and make it clear that his betrayal was unforgivable. And she would have to face Jason, the man who had stood by her through everything, and decide whether his silence could ever be forgiven. But Carly wasn't just facing a betrayal of trust, she was facing the destruction of everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in. Her world was crumbling, and she wasn't sure if there was any way to put it back together. The situation would force Carly to confront a painful truth. No matter how hard she tried to protect her loved ones, sometimes the world had its own plans. Sometimes secrets festered, betrayal reared its ugly head, and trust was shattered in the most unexpected ways. Carly had always been a warrior, but even warriors had their breaking points. She would have to decide whether she could find a way to forgive, to move past the hurt and the anger, or if this would be the moment that finally tore her family apart. The choices she made would shape the future of her relationships with Jack, Jason, and Jocelyn forever. And no matter what she chose, Carly knew that her life would never be the same again. As the pressure mounts, Carly finds herself facing Jason, the one person she had trusted most in her life. This wasn't just a simple confrontation, it was a moment that would challenge the very core of their relationship. For years, Jason had been her rock, always there when she needed him, offering unwavering support. He was the one she could count on when everything else seemed uncertain. But now, Jason had kept the most devastating secret from her, and Carly couldn't understand how he could do that. How could he, of all people, withhold such critical information about their daughter, Jocelyn, being involved in the dangerous world of the WSB? The betrayal Carly felt from Jason was sharper than any wound she had ever endured. He had always been her protector, the one person who would never let anything happen to her or her children. But now Carly was left questioning everything. How could he, knowing what he knew, keep the truth from her? Was their bond built on false promises, on an illusion of loyalty? Carly's anger was all-consuming. She had trusted him with the most precious thing in her life, her family, and he had betrayed that trust. The pain of this betrayal cut deep, and Carly knew that forgiving Jason would not be easy, even if she ever could. Jason, on the other hand, was in a difficult position. He had kept the secret from Carly not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he believed that protecting Jocelyn was the most important thing. He had seen the dangers that the WSB posed and knew that, in his eyes, Jocelyn had the right to make her own choices. Jason, always the quiet protector, had believed that the less Carly knew, the safer she would be. But now, as Carly's fury reached its peak, he realized the price of his silence. The person he had always tried to protect, Carly, was now the one hurt the most. Jason would attempt to explain himself, to plead his case to Carly. He would tell her that he did what he thought was best for Jocelyn, that he kept silent to shield her from the truth, to avoid putting any more pressure on Carly. But would Carly accept this reasoning? Could she look past the betrayal, the deception, and understand Jason's motives? Or would this be the moment that broke them beyond repair? Carly's heart was torn. She wanted to believe in Jason, to forgive him, but the pain of his silence was unbearable. The thought that Jason, who had always been her trusted ally, could choose to protect her from the truth in this way felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind. The tension between them was palpable. Carly had always been a woman who faced her emotions head-on, but this was different. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or a disagreement, it was about trust, the very foundation of her relationships. Jason had kept Carly in the dark, and she had never been one to tolerate being kept in the dark, especially when it came to her family. Every word Jason spoke in his defense only seemed to deepen the wound, making it harder for Carly to find forgiveness in her heart. She wanted to scream, to lash out, but all she could do was listen to him try to justify his silence, all the while feeling like her world was crumbling around her. As Carly navigated her emotional turmoil, she was also forced to confront the bigger issue at hand: safety of her daughter. Jocelyn had been pulled into the dangerous world of the WSB, a world Carly had spent her life trying to shield her children from. It was a world filled with secrets, lies, and deadly consequences. Carly had always believed she could protect her children from anything, but now she was faced with the harsh reality that she couldn't always control what happened to them. Jocelyn, for all her independence and bravery, had made decisions that placed her in grave danger, and Carly knew that the consequences of those choices would affect everyone around her. Jocelyn, too, was coming to terms with the consequences of her actions. She had been lured into the world of espionage and danger, believing she could handle it. But the reality was much darker than she had anticipated. As the weight of her decisions settled on her shoulders, Jocelyn began to see the true cost of her involvement with the WSB. She had stepped into a world that was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined, and now she would have to navigate the consequences. Jocelyn's decisions weren't just affecting her, they were affecting her family, and especially Carly. Carly had always been the one to shield Jocelyn from harm, but now Jocelyn had put herself in a position where her own mother couldn't protect her. The weight of this realization would force Jocelyn to re-examine her choices and the consequences they had for everyone she loved. As Carly continued to grapple with her own emotions, she knew that the time had come to make difficult decisions. Would she forgive Jason? Could she move past the betrayal, or would this be the final straw that ended their relationship for good? More importantly, how could she protect her family from the dangers that were closing in around them? Carly had always been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone was safe. But this time, the situation was beyond her control. The WSB, Jack Brennan's manipulation, and Jocelyn's involvement in the organization were all factors that Carly couldn't have anticipated. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't undo what had been done. Carly's future now hung in the balance. She would have to face the truth about the people she loved, the secrets they had kept from her, and the damage those secrets had caused. She would have to make a decision about how to move forward with her relationships with Jason, with Jack, and with Jocelyn. It would require a level of strength she wasn't sure she had left. The choices Carly would make in the coming days would determine not just the future of her family, but also whether she could ever rebuild the trust that had been shattered. The end of this chapter in Carly's life would mark the beginning of something else, something unknown. She would have to find a way to protect Jocelyn, to ensure her safety in a world that had become far more dangerous than Carly ever could have imagined. She would have to find a way to rebuild the fractured relationships in her life, knowing that some things could never go back to the way they were. And she would have to reconcile the pain of betrayal with the love she still had for the people who had hurt her the most. The journey ahead would be one of healing, but also of reckoning. Carly knew that the decisions she made in the days to come would shape not only her own future but the future of her entire family.